Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. Still in self-isolation, but still joined by Chris Hamill and Patrick Van Straten. Right, let's get straight into the questions. No messing about. The first one was sent in by Poochie Woochie. Great handle. With Kingsley Coman being linked with United, do you think they should go with cheaper alternatives to Sancho? And if so, do you think Coman benches Greenwood? Now, it's a bit United specific, I think, this question. So I kind of want to pose the idea of who the best of the rest should be signing this summer, other than Liverpool, because obviously they're so far clear. But we may as well start with Manchester United, who we think they should be signing this summer, because of course that link to Kingsley Coman happened when Andy Mitten reported it, and then Bild kind of denied it, and it went back and forward between the two. Pato, what are your thoughts on sort of the Kingsley Coman, Jadon Sancho moves? Would you just go balls to the wall for Jadon, or not?
Yeah, I'd definitely go really, really hard for Jadon Sancho. He's going to solve a bunch of problems. He can pretty much play anywhere in that attacking band except centre forward. I'm not sure the same is true for Kingsley Coman, and I'm not sure that you're actually going to get him at a knockdown price. Like, Bayern Munich have brought in Sané, but Sané is coming off a major injury, and Coman is coming off a very good season. He's played over 1,500 minutes this season for the first time in 4 years. I think he's at like 0.6 expected goals and assists a game, loads and loads of dribbles as well. I mean, he is a useful player to have. And for Bayern, they're pretty certain they're going to win the league. You know, the fact they didn't win the league, the fact they went on to win the league this season, despite how badly the year started, kind of shows that it's almost impossible for them to fail in Germany at this point. So if you want to win the Champions League, you need to have this kind of squad depth. You can't just rely on Sané coming in and being fit all season round. And to be honest, Coman, when I've watched Bayern, has mostly played off the left. And to me, this is like Man United's problem generally. You know, you've got a bunch of guys who they're kind of happy at centre forward, they're kind of happy playing off the left. And it's been harder to find someone to fill that right wing slot. I mean, even Sancho has played much more on the left this season than he had in previous years. But he at least makes sense because he's been an elite performer there. If you can't get him, I'm not sure it makes sense to go and get Coman, who is not a reliable presence to me. Like, he's a very good player. I think he should bench Greenwood. Whether he would is a different question. I think at the moment it's quite hard to justify benching Greenwood because he keeps scoring. But if I were going to go and get somebody instead of Sancho, I would want to target someone who really specifically has always inhabited that right wing role. You know, like, those guys are hard to find, but there are people around. You know, there's Federico Chiesa, for example. He's probably one of the better young players in that position. I just think that sort of thing would make more sense to me than this like weird idea of, okay, well, we'll just get a known entity then in that position. It reminds me a little bit of when Mourinho came in, and it was just, you know, household names that they were targeting. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and like, I've got worries that if it's not Jadon, it'll end up being like Willian. Do you know what I mean? Where you know that he's probably going to want to play out on that right wing, maybe on a 1 or 2 year deal. So that slightly concerns me. But for me, yeah, I just think United just have to get Jadon Sancho. There should be no qualms about Man United getting Jadon Sancho this summer, I don't think. I think Dortmund always sell one star player per summer, don't they, really? And United can claim that coronavirus has affected the finances, and I'm sure it has. But United should be able to go out and get Jadon Sancho this summer with Champions League football to offer, a right wing position available, big money coming from that Champions League and the Adidas kit deal. I just think that United have to get Jadon Sancho this summer, and Ollie's done his job. Ollie's held up his side of the bargain. He's got top 4. He's got to a cup semi-final. He's still in the Europa League. Now it's time for Ed Woodward and Matt Judge to hold up their end of the bargain and go and get players that can push us on to the next level. And Jadon Sancho is that guy. So for me, it should be Jadon Sancho or bust, really, for that board. But I'm sure they will have alternatives. Is there anybody else, Hamill, you can think of that could be an alternative to Sancho?
Yeah, I mean, I got a little bit bored with this scenario. Obviously, United fans won't be. Why would you be being linked with a player like Jadon Sancho? But I actually started looking at sort of a left-sided centre-half for you, because I think that's where you're equally as needy. And, I mean, you've been linked with Pau Torres from Villarreal, who's a very good player. He's been heavily linked with Barcelona. Apparently, he has a release clause of 50 million euros. His one weakness, the one sort of chink in his armour this season at the Yellow Submarine has been aerial duels. So in that sense, he's sort of the perfect partner for Harry Maguire, who's of course very prolific in the air. Yeah, I mean, the main problem for me at United, at least from a defensive point of view, and you actually have been pretty sound defensively. We've referred to it as a sort of one consistent Champions League component of your side. But in order for you to progress, I think you need more speed in the back line. Like Lindelof and Maguire aren't quick. And particularly when Maguire plays on the left side, I feel like Luke Shaw doesn't give him an adequate amount of cover. You can obviously solve his lack of pace by playing him on the right side, bringing in a left defender, and having Wan-Bissaka make up for that lack of pace with Maguire. Now, Torres is a little bit of an out there shout because he is sort of, I think his preferred move is Barcelona as well. So I've gone for Gabriel from Lille, who would cost around £25 million. Watched him in 3 or 4 games this season in the Champions League. A couple of games against Ajax and against Chelsea, I believe, where Tammy Abraham, if I remember correctly, actually gave him a pretty tough time. But 22, has got a bunch of first-team appearances to his name in the sort of last 18 months. Wouldn't cost an arm and a leg, like I just sort of said, around £25 million. Formed a formidable partnership with Jose Font, who's just evergreen now. I think he's about 43 at this point. And Napoli have actually reportedly agreed personal terms with Gabriel already. Of course, they've been raiding Lille, haven't they? Still pursuing Victor Osimhen. I'm not sure if it's quite over the line yet, but apparently Milik's going to Juventus, Osimhen's going to Napoli, and that sort of circus might be complete fairly soon. But Gabriel's got some really nice attributes. There's massive areas where he can improve. Sort of his willingness to play the ball through the line. Although he has got more progressive passes this season than both Lindelof and Maguire, and sort of some of his positioning, but that's because he's 22, right? 62 passes a game, 84% pass accuracy, so can be maybe a little bit more reliable with his distribution, but he does try a lot of long balls, which I think would sort of suit United well. 70% of them are accurate, I read this morning, which is pretty formidable. I think he tries around 4 per 90. And if he can find Greenwood, if he can find Martial, Rashford running into those dangerous half spaces with a nice accurate long ball, then I think that's another really good tool in Arsenal's, in United's toolbox. But no, I would go for him at 25. Like if you're gonna, I kind of budgeted for Jadon, right? If you go and spend 120 on Jadon, you're not going to have that much more money to play with, surely. So this is a little bit of a left field shout, but I think it's one that could serve United really well, and I think they need to probably be a bit more expansive in their defensive recruitment. Like you just need a bit of speed, a bit more physicality back there, and I think he could be the guy. Or you could just sign Wilfred and Ndidi, but that might eat into the Jadon budget, right? So there's a conflict of interest there.
Yeah, I mean, we may as well touch on the defensive midfield position, because I do agree with you. I think it's one United definitely need to upgrade. I know that Nemanja Matic has got that 3-year deal, which I think he was deserving of a contract. Whether or not 3 years was the right amount of time to give him remains to be seen. But I do still think we need another defensive midfield option. And yeah, obviously Ndidi's the dream in there, isn't it? He'd be amazing in that defensive midfield position, Pato. Do you think he's the right man United should target this summer, or would you spend funds elsewhere?
I don't think you would have enough money for him and Sancho, like Chris was saying. And if it's a choice between the two, I definitely get Sancho. Sancho is an incredibly rare talent, and Ndidi is amazing. But I'd feel more confident about finding an alternative to him than an alternative to Sancho. You know. But you do, I don't know, I kind of keep thinking, like, amid all these Arsenal rumours about Thomas Partey, why aren't Man United linked to him? The price is completely reasonable. You don't have to worry about money in the way that Arsenal do. He's, you know, you have this difficulty, which is that McTominay is not a defensive midfielder. McTominay doesn't have the defensive output, and to be honest, he's not enough of a passer in that position. Fred does have the defensive output, but is just technically not there for you. And I think that Partey would kind of solve those problems. Like, Partey is an excellent technical player, really good passer and distributor. extremely mobile. For you, I don't think it's that much of an issue that you'd have to replace him in kind of 4 years' time. That wouldn't worry me too much if I were Man United. I just think that would be the really smart move, because a lot of the other guys, like Declan Rice is pretty decent, but I think he'd cost more than Partey, and Didi probably cost twice as much. So with that in mind, I think that it would just be the sensible thing. Like, don't get me wrong, like there are other players you could go out there and try and get. You could go and get like Camavinga off Rennes or something, but United are not going to do that. United are not going to sign a 17-year-old defensive midfielder. They're not going to do it. And with that, and kind of, I think as a result that somebody like Partey is he has the right blend of attributes and kind of drawbacks in a way, which will make him gettable for United. Whereas, I keep seeing people say, oh, United should just go and get Brozovic or whatever, and I think it's harder to get players out of clubs with elite coaches who are paying them decent money than you think it is. Partey isn't really paid that much and is clearly ready to go. There's loads of umming and ahhing from Arsenal. I think United should just step in and get him.
That's an interesting shout. I saw George Wright saying the same thing in the WhatsApp group midweek. He was saying that United, like a midfield three of Partey, Pogba and Fernandes, is really excited midfield three.
Yeah, definitely. Really good.
So I can see that shout. I also think United are probably going to go for a striker this summer. I have concerns that United aren't going to go for a midfielder based on that Matic contract, and they're going to identify a right winger, a centre-back and a striker as the three areas they look to improve on. I know that United have heavily linked to Jack Grealish still, but I think that move would only ever get sanctioned if, Lingard, Pereira and Mata left the club. I don't see Grealish coming with those boys still at the club. And I think Villa are going to I think Villa might price Grealish out of a move. I can actually see Grealish still being a Villa player
I
next
think so
summer.
as well.
I can just see that happening. Let's go on to another club then that want to rein in the gap, Chelsea. Now, they have already signed all their forwards, I think it's fair to say, pretty much, with Havertz, Werner and Ziyech coming through the door. So, should we start with goalkeeper? Because I keep seeing Jan Oblak linked. I keep seeing Andre Onana linked. I think I saw Nick Pope linked today. Where do they go with this Kepa situation, Hamster?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about him on the podcast pretty extensively, didn't we? Which would have come out Wednesday, so make sure you go and check that out. We sort of picked the best and the worst players from the top six, plus Arsenal. But I don't know what more can be said. I mean, Kepa, worst save percentage in the Premier League this campaign. Only sort of Jordan Pickford is in the same stratosphere as his level of performance. So they either give him another season to try and save face from the fact they made him the world's most expensive goalkeeper, and the sort of back him to improve in that sense, maybe akin to David De Gea's sort of first season on English shores, or they just go straight in for a first choice goalkeeper. I could see Frank Lampard going for Nick Pope more so than Onana. Like Onana, it feels like interest has cooled a little bit, and whilst he's also a very good goalkeeper and I do rate him, he has got some very Kepa-like moments in him. It's interesting that I was talking to some Ajax fans about him a couple of months ago now, and they were saying, like, from a transfer perspective, they're amazed that the English press hasn't really honed in on some of his individual errors in times gone by. So yeah, maybe it will be Nick Pope, but how much do you pay for Nick Pope? Is the question.
He would cost so much money to get out of Burnley.
He's there like one-star asset, isn't he?
I genuinely think Burnley will price him upwards of 50 million quid probably.
I mean, would you pay 50 million
pound goalkeeper? No, I wouldn't. I don't think so. But how old is he? 27, 28? So I just wouldn't pay upwards of 50 mil for Nick Pope, and I think that's what Burnley would value him at. No, given that, how much did Pickford go for from Sunderland? 30. That was 4 years ago now, something like that. So why not? If you're Burnley, the market's only got larger. I would be pricing him as one of our star assets. So I just don't see in any world Pope going to Chelsea.
I'd be taking a militant standpoint if I was Sean Dyche. He's got him and McNeil that he can probably sort of drive the value upon, right? Particularly as they're homegrown. McNeil's young. But do you think Chelsea are going to have to sell before they bring anyone else in? Of course, they've spent on Ziyech, they've spent on Werner. Like Kai Havertz is supposedly coming in. That's apparently nailed on. Jorginho might be off. They've been linked with Benacer, who I think, we all rank very highly from a numbers perspective. Obviously, you have to apply the eye test to that as well, but which I have in recent weeks. But Ismail Benacer he's been very key to sort of Milan's resurgence post-lockdown. And I think Pioli and whoever comes in as permanent manager, because apparently it's not Rangnick anymore, will be doing their utmost to keep him. But I think you'd have to pay 40 to 50 for him as well. Would you move for Benacer, Pat, if you were Chelsea?
Yeah, probably. If I were to sell Jorginho, I mean, I'm not sure that you're going to get him this summer because Milan do have money. Milan can just say no. But yeah, he'd be a great signing. It does certainly seem like they're open to rejigging that midfield because there are quite persistent rumours that they're willing to sell Conte and Jorginho. And if you were going to do it, this summer would probably be the one, like to maximise their value. But then that leaves you with an awful lot of work to do in the summer. Yeah, I think Benacer would be great. I don't really know what profile they're looking for, but the thing is about Chelsea, they just have so many assets they can move on to raise money.
Yeah.
Like they've got like Bakayoko coming back this summer, who they can definitely sell for decent money. They could even like use him as a backup if they wanted. They could do whatever they want. They've always got tons of these guys knocking about. Like Izzy Brown has had a great season in the Championship. They'll get money for him. Like they've got a bunch of space on the wage bill freeing up as well if Pedro and Willian were to go. So,
like you can think they're gonna get money for Barkley. They're gonna get money for Michy Batshuayi. They're gonna get money for Bakayoko. If they sell Jorginho, they're probably gonna get a decent chunk there. They're gonna get Pedro's
one of their left backs
wage off. Willian's off. Yeah, one of the left backs off. Potentially a centre back if they want to, because they've got a few mediocre ones in there. So yeah. They've probably got upwards of £60 million worth of saleable assets in the team immediately. And I keep seeing the links to Declan Rice. I'm not sure that's quite right. I know that Frank I was reading a couple of articles where he's apparently keen to turn him into a centre back. I don't know whether that's the right move for me. I think maybe you need a slightly more established name to sit in there alongside some of the younger centre backs. So I think that's probably what they'll do. But I think they've got a load of money to spend this summer, honestly. I think they'll go massive and they'll shift a lot of deadwood because they've still got to sign a left back as well. And Chilwell's not going to happen. They're not going to spend 80 or 70, 80 million on Chilwell like Leicester
this morning it was reported the player was really pushing for the move and Leicester fans weren't happy with him on Twitter, sort of pushing for it post Chilwell. Yeah, post failing to secure Champions League football. I was thinking when you mentioned Bakayoko there, Milan fans really want him back at the club. So whether he could be, if they sold Jorginho, whether he could be a part of the deal to bring Benacer to the Premier League. I mean, I'd be all for that just to see him week in, week out because he's been a special little player. But yeah, do we think that Chelsea are, if we're going to make this question about challenging the sort of hegemony of Liverpool and Manchester City, do we think that Chelsea are the closest team to that, or Manchester United sort of one signing away from being on a par with Chelsea?
I think Chelsea's business that they've already got over the line puts them at a significant advantage. Just they've done really good early business. Like the players are already training. Like I've seen Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech already training with the team. And I think that puts them at a significant advantage, given that there's for Man United it'll be like a 3-week pre-season.
United need both that Sancho signing and a DM signing, I think, to get to that point. Like Chelsea next year, like they actually had Conte only available for about half the season. If you drop him into this side next year and you completely upgrade that front line and you get a left back and a keeper, I mean that's a huge step up. United have more to do and have done less so far. I think Chelsea could actually end up pretty close to the top two next season potentially.
So, I mean, should we talk about Man City? Because they're still a long way back from Liverpool and they're obviously going to spend, I saw one report in The Athletic saying they might spend around 300 million this summer. Obviously, two fingers fully up towards FFP there.
I think because of that £300 million figure, we could save Manchester City for another episode, couldn't we? And just talk about their business yes, just separately, because it does feel like they're going to make huge moves. But just to answer your question, there's other players they've been linked with, and they seem to be going down a younger route, don't they? Ruben Diaz, Pau Torres, again, been linked with both Manchester clubs. But then again, yeah, also linked with David Alaba. So I do think, yeah, City are perhaps going to go down a younger route, or maybe even Garcia will get minutes. But do we think they need to spend £300 million to draw level with Liverpool? Like, are they? I feel like the points deficit has almost tricked people into believing they're a vastly inferior side to Liverpool, and I don't think that's really the case. I think one or two more signings, and they'll be there again or thereabouts.
All right. So what about the other teams that were challenging this season? Let's have a look at Leicester, because obviously they were pre-Christmas. Some people were considering them like Liverpool's closest title threat, weren't they? Maybe wrongly, but that was some of the narrative that was being built. It now feels to me like they need to upgrade in loads of areas, and I obviously saw that clip of Rodgers saying, we don't have the funds to compete. But maybe another striker, a right winger.
Well, I saw you suggest Wilfred Zaha in the WhatsApp group, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, I just was reading yesterday, the Palace are willing to let him go now for a lower fee. Obviously didn't have his best season at Palace, but I feel like he's kind of been kept there against his will to some level. And has wanted to get out for a year plus now. And yeah, I just think he would be a decent option for Leicester. I don't think he would solve all their issues, but it would certainly take some of the burden off of James Maddison and Jamie Vardy and allow a right wing option to actually play right or left. I don't know. I think he would be a good signing. That's the sort of level Wilfred Zaha could go to, because I don't think he's going to go to one of the truly elite clubs across Europe anymore, sadly for him.
But he's not young though, and he is overpaid, and he's going to be overpriced as well. Like, I mean, if Palace had gone down and they could get him for a knockdown fee, I think that would be fine. But the difference between Leicester and the truly big sides isn't really in the quality of like their first 11. It's in their depth, right? Like, if a couple of players go out injured, then suddenly you're looking at all academy graduates in the team. Like Hamill was talking the other day about how at times, like their back line during the run-in looked like a kind of League One back line just because it was a bunch of kids. And so from my point of view, I think, like a really big signing who could play on the right wing would be a smart move. But I also think they'd be quite intelligent to work out who of their assets they mind losing the least, maybe sell them, and then do just like some general like fixing up in their depth. Yeah. So if you just look at the clubs who've gone down, like I think that like David Brooks from Bournemouth and Lewis Cook would be quite interesting pickups. Diego Rico even. I think that you could go to Norwich and you could probably like pluck out Buendia, because other clubs will and ah and think, oh well, if we miss out on our top target, maybe we'll go for him. If you're Leicester and you just move quickly, you could probably nail that move down, or go and try and get Ismaila Sarr off Watford. All those players are really, really useful, and I'm not saying that a couple of them I think would improve Leicester's first team. Most of them wouldn't, but would they improve Leicester's squad over the course of the season? Yeah, definitely.
Which assets would you sell, Pat? Which assets would you sell? Because obviously I've seen James Maddison's effectively signed that new contract, so he's not going anywhere this summer. Which asset would you get rid of? Would it just be Chilwell? You just say, okay, you can have him for 60, 70.
I think I'd rather lose Chilwell than Ndidi. But similarly, if somebody came in with like huge money for Soyuncu or something, I might potentially rather lose Soyuncu than Chilwell. I don't really know. Like, it depends on... I'd kind of want to know what their fitness record is, how hard they're agitating for a move, what the eventual bid is, whether I have multiple bidders. Like, I think Chilwell seems like the obvious candidate, and I wouldn't want to sell him if I were at Leicester. But if you genuinely have no money, then you're gonna have to sell one of these guys at some point. Like, you can't just sit there forever and not do anything. Otherwise, people's contracts will run down and they will start agitating. So, yeah, I think if somebody came in with an obscene offer for Chilwell, I would certainly try and get Man City and Chelsea bidding against each other. Then I think, you know what? I back Leicester's... if I were Leicester, I think I'd back our scouts to find a decent enough left-back replacement and to find value with the rest of the money for the rest of the squad. If you could turn like 60, 70 mil for Chilwell into like a midfielder, a backup right back, a quality winger like Ismaila Sarr or Buendia, and a new left back, I think that would be like really good business, even if none of those players were like genuine world beaters. I think that would be quite intelligent. And Leicester have been able to do this in the past.
Yeah, it's not that I agree, kind of. I think you could even go and get, like, say, Jamal Lewis out of Norwich if you sold Ben Chilwell for a decent fee, and then hopefully he sort of contributes 60% of what Chilwell can to this side.
Or shop in the Championship. If Brentford don't come up, like, go and get Ben Rama. Go and get Ben Rama and get a left back, and you'll be in pretty good shape.
And then I suppose we're down to Tottenham next. Feels like they just need to get a few players playing better to start with, given that they've still got Ndombele at the club, still got Ryan Sessegnon at the club that haven't really kicked on as much as people hoped they would. Maybe another centre-back now Jan Vertonghen's leaving.
Well, maybe Leicester should have a sniff around Ryan Sessegnon, particularly if
that's a great shout. That'd be a fun shout.
If José Mourinho really doesn't fancy him, yeah.
Yeah, I think those sorts of moves would be really smart for Leicester. Like, there's rumours that like Ainsley Maitland-Niles could go from Arsenal this summer for not very much. He'd be excellent depth for Leicester, both in the fullback slots and in midfield. And he's young and he's homegrown. Like, that seems sensible. I mean, Spurs, I think they need probably a starting left back, a starting right back, another centre back, potentially another midfielder. They need a backup striker. There's a lot of work to be done there, despite how generally positive I am about the squad. I mean, I don't want to go on about it too much because the Extra Time podcast this week, Doogie and I are doing a how to fix Tottenham. So there's a little bit more depth on that. But I think that my worry about Spurs is giving Mourinho too much power there, because if you buy players for a Mourinho system, knowing that he's not going to be there beyond kind of 2 or 3 years, then you find yourself doing another rebuild in a couple of years' time. And Mourinho, while admittedly in January they brought in, Gedson Fernandes, they brought in Stefan Bergwijn, like those are young signings. Mourinho has historically not really prized long-term value in signings. He tends to like his guys who are like 28 and he knows are ready to perform now. If I was Spurs, I would be very keen to stick to my guns and say, you know what, we're going to carry on signing players in the right age range, regardless of what Mourinho wants.
Yeah, agreed. Wolves then, just a very quick one before we move on to quick-fire questions on Wolves, because I really don't know where they need to improve. I suppose maybe another midfielder to support João Moutinho and Neves, given that Moutinho is going to be 33 this summer, is he? Something like that. I think
it's probably a similar cases to Leicester, right? It's just a matter of squad depth, and they're both operating in really like unique areas, I guess, in that they are knocking on the door in terms of Champions League football or they're hounding down the fourth place position. But the teams behind them haven't really got their shit together, so they probably can spend a year trying to like go for some of these more not speculative signings but risky signings. So those young players that are being relegated that you and Pat sort of spoke about before, like if they don't work out over the course of the next season, then they'll probably still be in the Europa League positions, if you know what I mean. Like Everton aren't going to sort out their quickly enough to be challenging Wolves and Leicester, in my opinion. So I think it's probably a matter of squad depth for Wolves as well. I'd be lying through my teeth if I said that I knew exactly what they needed. But yeah, I think they can probably just shop in the same market as Leicester.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to some quick fire questions then. This one was sent in by Ahmar909. I suppose you're probably in the best place to take this one, seeing as you did a one-on-one at Hamill. But thoughts on Milan turning their back on Ralf Rangnick?
I don't really know who's turned their back on who, right? Because Gazidis really wanted Ralf Rangnick, supposedly, as early as late last year. So it's kind of, it's constantly come out of his camp that nothing has been agreed, nothing's set in stone. So clearly he isn't happy with, I don't know who he'd report into or how little power he gets. He's quite omnipotent at Red Bull. He's been able to shape, that pack of clubs in his image. So maybe AC Milan aren't willing to give him, to cede that much power. But it's a weird one. I mean, they've obviously been the form side since lockdown, haven't they? Like they've been scoring freely. Form players who were formerly absolutely panned like Çalhanoğlu have been great since. And I think you go for Rangnick over Pioli. Pioli probably deserves the chance to to stay on to at least coach going into next season, because he's done an absolutely superb job given the circumstances, and he is a journeyman coach, and he hasn't had a sustained period of excellence at any one club. So I do get Milan's hierarchy sort of having the reservations about that as well if a top manager comes along. But ultimately, I think AC, if a top coach makes himself available, like they should go for them and resist the temptation to kind of give Pioli more time based on this kind of 6-month bump. It might sound harsh, but that's just how I'm thinking. And it's really hard to comment on the rest of the Rangnick stuff, I guess.
Fair enough. Let's get the next one then. This one from Rebel Time Punk. He says, do you think Leeds under Bielsa can emulate the likes of Wolves and Sheffield United by challenging for European football in their first season back in the Prem, Pat?
I think it's really dependent on who they bring in. They've got a good style of football, but I think actually often teams who dominate the ball in the Championship really struggle when they come up to the Prem because they can't do it in the same way. Like you just can't have 60% of the ball against the top sides in the Premier League. It won't work. On the other hand, Bielsa, is obviously a very experienced coach. He's got the team pressing really high. There is quality there, but some of the moves that they've been linked with this summer, I think they're going to need to make more than a few of them happen in order to reach that level. Like Wolves came up with a squad which already had a bunch of guys in it who had not only been in top leagues but had been at Champions League clubs, like who were that good. That isn't the case with Leeds. But they are linked to stuff, like they've been linked with Jonathan David this week, potentially competing with Lille for him. That would be really exciting. I think if they do a couple of those, I'll have a little bit more faith. But for the moment, I'm going to reserve judgment until I know what they're actually capable of doing in the transfer window. Because yes, Bielsa's a great coach. Yes, they play good football. But if they expect to come up and just play exactly the same way, I think they'll be in trouble. And in a way, like you can argue that Wolves and Sheffield United, one of the reasons those two sides have succeeded is because they haven't come up, like thinking they were going to dominate the ball the way they did in the Championship. Wolves have been content to be a really solid defending counter side. Sheffield United play an extremely clever and aggressive defensive system. They're kind of all right being underdogs. Are Leeds happy to do that? Because if they're not, then they could potentially find themselves in difficulties like Norwich did and like Villa did to some extent.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is going to be dependent on who they bring in. And obviously, I've read some stuff about Jean-Kevin Augustin. Obviously, he came in from Leipzig, didn't he? And had to play 5 appearances, I think, or something like that. And he might have just scraped 5. And now Leeds have to pay Leipzig 20 million euros because of that, because they had an obligation to buy. So they need to be smart with their finances, and fingers crossed they are, because I actually do hope they do pretty well next season. Final quickfire one then. We'll just wrap this off very quickly. What should be England's front 3 or 4 in the Euros next season based on the current performance of players? That was from Mufsiu. Hamster, who would you go for as England's front 3?
Sterling, Kane, Sancho.
Sterling, Kane, Sancho. No Rashford.
Not in that 3, no.
Okay, very, very easily said. Pato?
I would want to find a home for Rashford. I think maybe I would try and do a front 4 of the 3 Chris mentioned plus Rashford. But it depends if Kane can sustain the form he's in now for the next year, because this is the first time he's been in this form for a long time.
I think you also, that doesn't mean Rashford doesn't get a game at a tournament, right? Like that means Harry Kane plays 2 games, Rashford plays 1, and you carry on until you're knocked out. Or it's dependent on Harry Kane's fitness. But yeah, I would lead with Harry Kane. What about you?
Yeah, I think I would probably agree. I would agree with you guys. As good as Rashford's been, I think I would go Sterling, Kane, Sancho. But I think if Rashford has another 6 months like he had pre his injury, then every chance he could be starting over Harry Kane up front. He
was better than Kane this season. Like he was. Like Kane came back from lockdown in really good form, but across the course of the season, Rashford had a much better season.
Yeah, I mean, poor bloke did break his back as well, didn't he, to try and get us in the Champions League. So, talking of broken backs, let's go on to the final personal question. It's from Bruno Lucas. He says, "Have you ever broken any bones? I'm currently lying in bed with a broken ankle, and it would really mean a lot to me if you answered the question on Sunday Vibes. Get better soon, Bruno." Thank God I'm not saying that about Fernandez, but. Hamster, have you broke any bones?
I think I actually replied to him because I felt sorry for the kid. Yeah, like a bunch of like fingers and toes. I actually said in my reply to him, the most painful thing I've done is I've chipped a shin, which was fucking sore, man. But no like big breaks, fortunately, like touch wood. You know, when you see people, like I've been in the back of ambulances with friends who have done like bones on 5-a-side pitches, and it's horrendous. But no, the shin was the worst football injury I've racked up. I don't know what about you, Pat?
I chipped a kneecap when I was a kid. I fell over on like an icy playground at school, and they obviously can't do anything for it. They're just like, yeah, that'll heal in time, and it's still actually quite uncomfortable if I have to kneel down. But other than that, like the only one I'm pretty certain, as in like I'm like 95% certain that I broke my right big toe playing barefoot football one time, but I'd never had it confirmed. It was just that it hurt so much that I had to teach myself to play football left-footed.
Cheeky toe poke, was it?
Because
did the damage?
Oh, it was. I've no idea what it was. I think I stubbed it or something, but it was just But yeah, I've never had like an X-ray and they've said you've broken a bone.
My one, I suppose, yeah, I've only really broken one, to be fair. It was my thigh bone, which is not a particularly nice bone to break, to be fair.
Yeah.
Just playing football, just 50-50, and my like knee snapped, and it like fractured the bone from the base upwards, like splintered it off. But yeah, it's very painful.
What's the most pain you've been in?
Yeah, 100% breaking my thigh. Yeah, just incredibly uncomfortable. And I was just lying there, everybody's like, "Oh, you've just twisted your knee, mate." So I like hobbled off to the sideline, then sat in the back of a BMW, like to go to the hospital. And then they got there and like, "Yeah, bro, you broke your femur, and like done some serious damage to your ACL." So yeah, that one 100% just horrible.
I had a
injury.
mate who did his hip, and the PE teacher made him finish the 400 meters after doing his hip.
Oh my god!
There was a PE teacher at my school who was notorious for saying dumb. Like one time he asked our group to divide into 3 equal halves, which was pretty great.
Lol.
But he once told a kid injured during a rugby match to just like walk it off, and it later turned out that kid had broken his ankle. Yeah, not great from him.
Horrific. And what a way to end Sunday vibes. Should we promote the podcast then, Pat? You said you were doing something about fixing Tottenham.
Yeah, the podcast. That's the podcast coming out this week. Obviously, on the previous podcast, we looked at the top 6 plus Arsenal and the best and worst players of the season for each club. Then this forthcoming podcast with Doogie returning to the How to Fix format to discuss Spurs and how they can move on from a season which, despite where they ended in the table, has been pretty embarrassing.
When are we going to do
check
our annual end of season awards on the podcast?
Once United have won the Europa?
Yeah, probably after the Champions League final.
I always look forward to that podcast because you get to be a bit more of a silly bollocks, don't you? So,
all right, Hamster, anything to plug? Any one-on-ones coming out today?
No, it'd be a top 10 one-on-ones every 2 weeks, but I'm always looking for your ideas on one-on-ones. So get them to me on Twitter if you've had any worldies.
All right, there we go. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.